Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the second FIP Insider webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Following the stellar success of last week, where we had over 200 people on our session with John Wilpers, I'm delighted that we've once again got many hundreds of people signed up for today's session. Thank you once again for your support. It really means a lot to us. Today, we're delighted to bring you a session looking outside the media industry at the impact of the current crisis on brands and their marketing strategies. Now, we've all seen and experienced the impact of lockdown to varying degrees, of changes in consumer demand, and the impact, of course, of social distancing on our favorite brands. Well, today we're going to hear from a couple of experts from two different aspects of the world of brand marketing. We'll be talking about the good and the bad in terms of the responses to the crisis and discussing what we think the post-lockdown world is going to look like. But before I introduce today's speakers, let me run through a few quick housekeeping items, particularly for those of you who've not joined one of our webinars before. So today's session is a Q&A. There will be some slides, but there'll be mainly discussion, and we're very keen to incorporate questions from the audience. And if you look in your webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, you'll find the Q&A button somewhere down here. Go in there and you can submit your questions, and you can also upvote other delegates' questions and make comments on them. And we'll be using that as a guide for the discussion as we go along. There's also a chat box, which you should see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, so that side. You can access that via your webinar controls, and you can use this to chat either privately with myself and the panelists, or with the other attendees, and we'll be keeping an eye on that also throughout the event. I recommend you do keep that chat box open because the FIP team will be posting comments and useful links throughout the event, so there may be things in there that you want to save. Now, these events and the work that FIP does to share knowledge across the industry would not be possible without the support of our corporate partners. We have PressReader, the world's leading digital content discovery platform, and UPM, the world's leading forest-based bioindustry company. We thank both of them for partnering with us, and you'll be hearing more about their work in some of our future webinars in the weeks to come. We also rely on the support of the industry to enable us to carry out our work. Our two leading annual conferences, the Digital Innovators Summit and the FIP World Media Congress, which many of you will have attended in previous years, provide the bulk of FIP's revenue. Now, there's no certainty at the moment as to what extent we can count on income from these events in the immediate term. To continue, therefore, with our work on behalf of the industry, such as this new FIP Insider webinar series, we've decided to create a GoFundMe page. This is an initiative allowing you to contribute to support our work for the industry as you see fit. It is voluntary. The link should now be appearing in the chat box, and if you're able to make a donation, we suggest about £25. That would go a long way towards covering the cost of these webinars and allow us to continue to bring you great content through these webinars and elsewhere. And I should say, of course, that we are a not-for-profit. We don't pay dividends. All the income, including GoFundMe donations, is invested back into activities of benefit to the industry as a whole, including people like you supporting our work. Now, for those of you who are already members of FIP, we thank you for your support. For those that are not, we would encourage you to join. Please contact me for more details on how to do that. Membership really is the best way to get access to all the benefits that FIP has to offer. Tomorrow, you'll all get a post-event email with a link to the slides, so you don't need to take pictures or write notes, and details of our forthcoming webinars, including links to sign up for those. The next one will be on April 28th, when we have Nikolai Malyarov of PressReader, who'll be talking about how content distribution is changing in the current environment. Then we have noted business thinker Tom Triumph talking about how you can intentionally evolve your organization to enable success. And then on May the 7th, we'll be presenting the latest results from the FIP Digital Subscriptions Report. Now, I'm sure that'll be a very popular session given the spikes we're seeing in take-up of digital subscriptions globally in the current crisis. Details of all of these are on the website, www.fip.com, and will be in the post-event emails, and we look forward to seeing you there. Right, I think that's probably enough from me for the minute. It's now time to introduce my guests for today. Our first guest is Nikki Murphy, founder of the River Group 25 years ago. She has interests in several other businesses and agencies. Nikki is passionate about marketing. Before founding River, she had an extensive career in marketing and working in magazines, and before that at Procter & Gamble. She's a regular conference speaker, a proud mum, 2 children and 4 stepchildren, 3 dogs and 6 cats. Perhaps we'll see some of those today. She's also an active board member of FIP, a very big supporter of the industry, a keen supporter of the PPA, member of the Marketing Society, and a director and trustee of the Katie Piper Foundation. And our second guest is Danny Rippon. Danny is head of commerce for Europe for Capgemini. He's spent more than 25 years in digital businesses across software, services, and agencies. And he's an expert in helping companies maximize ROI via digital customer experience in retail and consumer goods. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Nikki, could you start by just telling us a little bit about the River Group, the work you do and the clients that you work with? And we've got some information that we can put on screen.
That would be lovely. Can people see us, James?
Yes, I think so. Let's just do a quick, let me stop sharing for a second. Let's just do a quick,
yes, thank you.
Unpin myself. There we go. There we go.
We should explain why we're not social distancing.
Oh yes, you should. Yeah, people will be wondering why you're not social distancing. Go on, explain.
Well, FIP get 2 for the price of 1. Nikki and I are husband and wife.
There we go. So there's no danger there.
We currently are. Depends on what happens at the end of lockdown.
See how well this goes. Okay, let me share our first slide, and then Nikki, you can talk a little bit about the River Group and what you guys do.
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay, so as James said, River is 25 years old. We have 26 global clients for whom we produce content strategy in many forms, including print, hence my membership of FIP. The group actually comprises 4 agencies, the biggest of which and the oldest of which is River, but there's Fish, which is a membership-focused consultancy, River Sounds, which is a webinar and podcast studio, and Maven, a newly launched in October of 2019 PR agency. My background, as James said, is in marketing. I have an MBA in strategic marketing and a doctorate in brand marketing. I'm a bit of a reluctant agency owner in the sense that marketing strategy is really what I'm best at.
Okay, fantastic. And Danny, tell us a little bit about Capgemini, which may not be so familiar to many of our media members, and what you do there.
Okay, thanks. So Capgemini is an enormous 270,000 person French company. Does all sorts of things, mainly around consulting and technology. My part of that, I'm head of a commerce business for Europe. There's some logos on the screen showing you some of the clients that we have. I'll talk about some of them today. Me, myself, actually ran an agency, a commerce agency, until about 2 years ago when Capgemini acquired that company.
Fantastic. Okay. Nikki, we're going to start with you if we can. You've got an enormous kind of portfolio of clients in the River Group, a wide variety of brands operating in a wide variety of sectors. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're finding in broad terms about the strategies that brands, both your own clients and others, are following at this time?
Yes, most certainly. I think it's fair to say that people are in a process. And if you share my first slide, James, I'll talk people through what I mean by that. So I think Danny and myself, obviously being husband and wife living in the same house and not social distancing, have put our presentation together. And Danny's going to talk a lot about how commerce is dealing with react, rebound and reposition. And I'm going to talk about how reputation management via content marketing really impacts on all of those things. And I think it's fair to say, in answer to your question, James, that some people are reacting and doing the right things from a content and voice point of view, and some most definitely are not, and I'm going to share some of that. I mean, first of all, though, there was a bellwether report for those marketers amongst you that was produced at the end of March, and you can see a quote on the left-hand side of the screen telling you that really, as agency businesses, and publishing is no different to that, you know, some of us are taking a bit of a pounding because clients are reducing marketing budgets. Some clients, some River clients included, are pausing marketing Some are reinvigorating marketing. Procter & Gamble, where I used to work, and Unilever are famously upping. It's said that Procter & Gamble are doubling marketing spend in this period, but other companies are not. I think one thing that's really important from a content and a publishing point of view and for brands and businesses generally, is thinking, not now that the panic has somewhat subsided and pretty much the world is in lockdown and the initial reaction is gone, and some people initially reacted very badly, that we're going to come into a rebound. And what people are really going to care about, and by people I mean B2C audiences and B2B audiences, because whether you're a business person or not, you're a human being first, is reputationally what your brand is putting out and what people are going to think about you. And if you get it wrong, then you can get it badly wrong.
So you must have a whole wealth of specific examples that you can give us. You've talked about the right and the wrong, if you like, the good and the bad of what people have done out there in response. Can you give us just some examples from your experience of what brands have done?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the bad ones because they're always the fun ones, right? And I think there's a slide coming up that'll talk to you about that. This is the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. So some of you will have seen, particularly those British folk amongst you, brands in the UK who have famously got it wrong. I've actually only got half a slide there, James, so I don't know if everybody's got the whole thing or if it's a build. There we go. Thank you. Share it across the board and I'll just wiggle in and out. I think probably one of the most notable ones who got it wrong right from the start from a content, marketing and brand reputation point of view was Mike Ashley at JD Sports, arguing with the government and being quoted in the mainstream media about how selling trainers and sweatpants was something that everybody needed and was an essential service. Very short-termist, and from a content and reputation point of view, a massive fail. Some more recent ones, Victoria Beckham, who has a personal fortune of 335 million. That's quite apart from David Beckham's fortune, which is considerably larger. Her fashion business, which she's had for about 10 years, hasn't made a penny of profit in that time, but does give home to 30 members of staff, all of whom she has furloughed to take advantage of the government furlough scheme, such that she doesn't have to pay them herself. Not great. And she has been hammered in the press, some would say quite rightly, for that. And the same for Richard Branson, who famously in 2009, in the last global recession, when British Airways, great institution for us Brits, said that they needed government help and please could the government bail them out, he was all over the media and TV saying it's absolutely disgusting, it's anti-competition, the government should not bail out this brand, British Airways, and yet now he's gone cap in hand to the government asking them to bail him out. And the interesting thing about that is, you know, Virgin's reputation is very much predicated on Richard's and Richard's on Virgin. So goodness knows reputationally what that will do for him. And then finally, a small one on the screen there, McDonald's in Brazil, who actually, for social distancing, for the first time in its history of McDonald's, broke the golden arches into two and got a lot of negative opinion, consumer opinion for doing that. For two reasons. One, because they were capitalizing on it, and two, because people couldn't go out to get a McDonald's anyway. So it was a bit pointless and sadly ironic.
I mean, the airlines generally haven't had a particularly good time of it during the crisis. One of our chatters here, Ped Millichamp, is suggesting that we should add Weatherspoons to that list as well.
Ped used to work for me. I seem to remember he had a particular fascination with Weatherspoons. Love you, Ped.
There we go. That makes it all right. We've got some more examples on the next slide, have we?
Yes, we do. And again, you're going to need to build me, as it were.
Build
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, you can read for yourself rather than me talking you through them. Although I do think Circles.life is a really interesting one, because not only was it a pretty distasteful brand content misfire, it was also very opportunistic. They had Dettol hand sanitizer on both press and media advertising, and they replaced Dettol by Data, them being a data and telco business, which went down very badly, and I believe they sacked their CMO as a result. Even the people that have been around forever and generally get it right, Coca-Cola, did something like the McDonald's Brazil example and broke their logo up around the, stay together by being apart messaging. And again, in the middle of New York's Times Square as it was pretty ridiculous, because again, everybody was indoors and nobody got to see it apart from the media, who hammered them for it. And my personal favourite in terms of could it be any less wrong is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who is one of the world's richest men. He was in the top 10, I believe, last year, actually asked the public to bail out his contract employees by setting up a public relief fund. And yet he's got a huge amount of personal wealth and a lot invested in the brand of Amazon to make sure that it, survives, which I'm sure not only will it will thrive if my 6 children's packages that are arriving 10 times a day have got anything to go by. But the other thing you can see on the screen there is he only donated £5 million to businesses local to his HQ in Seattle. And if you compare that to similar type businesses like Facebook at 20 million and Apple at 15 million, then it looks pretty greedy and not terribly impressive.
There's a bit of a theme emerging there, isn't there, with a bit of backlash in the press and generally, of people commenting on the fact that businesses are still paying dividends, still paying bonuses, despite the fact that they, in the same breath, may be furloughing staff or laying people off, reducing their salaries. We had the heir to the Disney fortune today commenting on this at Disney, where the executives there have cut their base salary but kept all their bonus and dividend options to the tune of many hundreds of millions of dollars.
And I think, as I said in one of my first slides, I think this scenario, this very odd scenario that we all find ourselves in globally, is showing from a brand perspective, a business perspective, but fundamentally from a human perspective, who are the good guys and who aren't the good guys. And I certainly know from reactions of people close to me in all of those arenas, the ones that I will be taking forward and the ones that I won't.
We'll come on to a little bit later what the kind of long-term impact of this might be on brands. We've had a few kind of negative examples. Give us some good news. Give us some positives, some examples of people who've done this well.
Some people are getting it brilliantly right, and of course a number of them are River clients, because we're
well,
I have to plug in. Come on.
Surprise.
I get another build slide here, James, so if you can just flick it on. Thank you so much. A global client for River for 13 years this year is Weight Watchers. One of the things that they've done that we haven't yet touched on is rapid digitization. So in the UK, for those of you in the UK, you know that Slimming World normally wipes the floor with Weight Watchers in terms of the number of members and meetings. Weight Watchers is a premium brand as opposed to Slimming World's mass market brand, that being one of the reasons. But Slimming World have spectacularly failed to hold meetings, and obviously this is a weight loss arena where people come together in mutual support to help each other with their wellness and weight loss goals. And Weight Watchers pivoted very quickly, and in speaking to their UK CEO most recently, she said that they had digitized more in 10 weeks than they probably had done in the last few years. So that's another trend that's coming. Doubletree Hilton, this one was close to my heart because even though it isn't currently a River client, I do like chocolate chip cookies. For those of you listening in from the States, Doubletree Hilton give you a warm chocolate chip cookie when you stay at their hotels, and have famously been asked lots of times, much like Kentucky Fried Chicken and the special recipe, to provide the chocolate chip recipe to people, and they've always said no. But they actually released it, calling it the very nice brand name of Doubletree Experience at Home, so that people could make their own chocolate chip cookies. And it gave them some fantastic content on Instagram and Facebook Live. If you don't follow them, go and have a look, of people baking at home their own version of the the Doubletree Hilton chocolate chip cookie. And then Nike, most people probably follow them. They literally opened up all of their subscription channels for free and used their ambassadors to train from home to inspire people in lockdown to get fitter and healthier themselves. Co-op, another long-term River client. We've worked with Co-op for 12 years. You know, their CEO, unlike Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Victoria Beckham, donated 20% of his salary to the NHS for the foreseeable future. Co-op have suspended normal marketing. They cancelled their Easter campaign, even though they were left with millions of Easter eggs, which they donated to the NHS. And they've set up a website called Cooperate, which lives and breathes their authentic values about community and you can sign up. I've done it in our local area. We live in Henley-on-Thames, and take prescriptions or shopping to people, speak to people on the telephone and get contact with local charities that help those in need. So Co-op have reputationally given themselves a big tick by, to be honest, being authentic to their brand values and doing what they've always done.
And just on the chocolate chip cookie example, Ped is also saying he's contributing a lot today. He's saying that IKEA did the same with their meatballs yesterday. So that's,
I didn't know that. My kids would be really pleased to hear that.
Yeah,
because apparently IKEA meatballs are better than my cooking.
Yeah, well, no comment. We've got some more examples. Let's move on to those straight away.
Okay, again, a build slide, James. I'm not going to go into these, except that two massive brands, WhatsApp and Google, again, living by their own rules, being accountable for their brand values and coming up trumps.
Okay, fantastic. There's some good examples there. So what do you think that brands should be considering at this time to make sure they get it right? I mean, how do we kind of take this and give some rules that people can use if they're thinking about their own brands and what they need to do in this environment?
Okay. Well, taking World Health Organization spokesperson's recommendation, be authentic, stand up for your values and be prepared to be accountable, because consumers are watching. But equally, don't do what the IPA has noticed that a lot of brands are doing and stop communicating. If you have something genuinely useful or helpful to say to your communities, then say it and do it and live by your brand values if they are correct for this moment in time. Okay,
fantastic. So I guess you would summarize that how? I mean, what's the kind of key takeaways from that if you wanted to do it as a sort of very easy kind of list for people?
Well, here's one we prepared earlier. Oh. If you can share my slide, that would be wonderful.
I can, hold on.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I've lost my controls now. Problem with doing this live.
You're just being authentic, James.
I know. Authenticity is my subject.
Oh no, you've missed one out.
There we go.
You've gone straight to that. No, you've still missed one out. There's one before that.
Oh, there we go.
And these are my last two for anyone who's fed up with the sound of my voice. Danny's just poked me in the rib, so thank you for that, husband. I mean, it's something that I've said, but I'm banging the drum again. Appropriate tone of voice and content at this time manages reputation. You need to be genuinely helpful and useful, otherwise shut up and don't say anything. So on the left-hand side, pick the mood of the nation and use social listening to understand how your brand is being regarded, positive and negative from a sentiment analysis point of view, and adjust your marketing and actions accordingly. Just like Weight Watchers, if you can, digitize fast. And Danny will come on to talk about how Capgemini have helped a number of global retailers to do just that, who didn't previously have DC to home services, because obviously if they can't sell their products, then they're going to go out of business. So you need to help your customers shop your brand as easily as possible, and also plan ahead. So we've talked about the reaction phase right the way through to when we're coming out of this, and what's the future to be. I think everybody needs to plan for the worst and hope for the best, and just make sure that you've got something in place to switch to as things move along, because none of us know how long this is going to take.
Good stuff. Thank you to Frank During, who's in the chat, has shared some examples of magazine brands also doing their bit for the stay home, stay positive messaging as well. Thank you for that. And Nirit, thank you for your question. I'll come to that a little bit later on when we talk to Danny. So Nikki, let's just look at your next slide where you've suggested some
last and
strategies.
final. Absolutely. So how should marketing people, brands, PR directors, CEOs of businesses globally get it right? I think everybody needs to consider what your customers need right now. Are they worried? Do they need services, prescriptions from home, for instance, for a number of the pharmaceutical companies that River work for? But also, what does your business need to do financially to survive? And not just now, but in the future. Those businesses that are treating their staff badly or that aren't putting their people first are killing their culture. So I think everybody has to do what's right for today, but also with an eye on what's right for tomorrow. And then when we get to the rebound phase, what will your customers need then that you can authentically provide? And some would argue that we're already in this phase now. And what can your business commit to giving them? And don't overpromise. Make sure that you can afford what you're offering, unlike the government potentially, in terms of what they've offered. And then finally, repositioning. What's your best guess as to what your loyal current customers will need versus your organisation's capability now and in the future? So scale your business now, understanding what will be the new normal. Will everybody go back to work? Will there be much more home working? There'll certainly be more digitisation, and out of that will breed different ways of working that Danny will come on to talk about. And then I guess the main thrust of everything that I've talked about: use your marketing mediums and your content in the best way that you possibly can to manage the reputation of your brand. Have you been a good guy? Because everyone's going to remember if you haven't.
Do you think, Nikki, just on that last point, do you think there is going to be a bit of a reckoning after this is all over? Do you think that people are going to reject or maybe not go back to brands that they think have behaved badly?
I think that's highly likely, yes. I mean, look at the Richard Branson example. The press backlash has been so awful to him that he's actually now put Necker Island up as collateral for a £4 billion loan that he's asking the government for. Interestingly, his own personal fortune is £4 billion, so potentially he could lend the money to himself, but that's another matter. But yes, I do think there'll be a backlash, and I think those brands that have been generally helpful and useful in this period will see great guns, and those businesses that have treated their staff as well as they possibly could in this time will also be remembered.
It does seem to me that a lot of companies, big companies, have treated this period like a sort of once in a generation rather than once in a century crisis, in the sense that they're still expecting to be able to make profits and pay bonuses and have a good share price and all that kind of thing. Do you think that's unrealistic?
I think it's very unrealistic. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the River Group as an example, we've decided to put people first. I mean, we're very fortunate in that it's an owner-run business. We don't have shareholders other than myself, so I guess it's easy for me to say, but we can afford to lose money. The question is, you don't want to lose too much, right? But for other big brands who've got great big coffers and big pockets, they most definitely shouldn't just be looking after their staff. They should be doing charitable good work.
One final question, very good question from one of the people in chat, from Grace Shepherd, and I'll rephrase her question slightly. Do you think that there is a danger that you can be too good in this? Is there a danger to your reputation if you're too good in this crisis? If you come out the other side and people might view you negatively as a bit of a do-gooder?
No, I don't think so, Grace. I think no, I don't. I think you should do what you can do and be authentic.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Nikki. Let's move on now to Danny. Welcome, Danny, Head of Commerce, e-commerce for Capgemini. We've spoken a little bit about brand strategies and what people can do in their marketing, who's got it right, who's got it wrong. We've talked a little bit about the now. We want to talk about the what's next as well, and what we think will happen in the post-crisis world. But before we come on to that, before we do a bit of future gazing, I wonder if you can characterize what you see happening at the moment. I think you've got some statistics you can share with us on consumer consumption and how that's been affected at this time. So if I put those up, perhaps you can talk through them. And that might be a good way for us to kick off this part of the discussion. Let me just do the screen sharing. There we go.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to talk about, Nikki talked about react, rebound, and reposition. So I'm going to kind of drill in slightly into each of those areas and look at what we're seeing. Capgemini sponsor a body called IMRG. IMRG have about 600 retailers and brands around the world that send them data, and they consolidate that data, and I'm going to talk about some of it now, which has got some very interesting trends. With the world moving to working at home, we've seen lots of more home-based usage of the internet and a lot more consumerism on the internet. And we've also seen kind of a polarization, some things really declining and other things really accelerating, like grocery is a great example. One of our grocery clients in the UK, their biggest peak day ever before this crisis was at Christmas in 2019. About 2 weeks ago, they were doing the same revenue every 3 hours as they did the entire day of their biggest day ever before. Wow. So you can see it's a tremendous amount of shift to buying online, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You can see some of the other challenges that people have had when physical stores shut down. Despite the fact that there are online stores available, some of them just are unable to fulfill, and I'll talk about that as well.
Just going back, just for a second, sorry, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier, just occurred to me, there's a bit of a danger here for retail sector, isn't there, for certain elements of it? If the grocery stores come out later this year with massive profits, they're going to be accused of profiteering.
They certainly are. But it is, you know, we're not going to restaurants anymore. We're not going to have a snack in the pub for lunch. We're not going to places where we would normally eat. So we are, the only place that we're eating from is a grocery store at the moment. So that they are seeing tremendous amounts of increase in traffic. How profitable they are and how they react to and what their reputation that they're going to put forward in the future. You know, Co-op, I think, to Nikki's point earlier, are doing a great job. As a grocer in sharing some of that burden. Others perhaps are not, and those will come out in the wash.
But you know what's really interesting, if I may interrupt, Danny? We shop in Co-op, obviously, but we also have a very big Tesco's near us. And something that's been particularly interesting is you recognise as a consumer the brands that you buy regularly and whether they've gone up or down in price. Now, we're gin and tonic drinkers in this house, and Tesco's have put up the price of a bottle of Fever Tree tonic from £1.60 to £2. I mean, that's not a tiny hike, that's a massive hike. And we've noticed, which has really put us off reputationally, the brand.
I'm glad you said that, because we noticed the same thing and we wondered whether it was just us, not specifically with tonic, but with the price of a basket of groceries definitely has gone up. And again, I wonder whether, going back to what we were talking about earlier, whether there's a little bit of a reputational element here that people need to start thinking about. I mean, there's almost a question of, is it a good long-term strategy to be making a profit from this crisis?
Yeah, well, interestingly, the other thing is, if we consider the in-store, because of social distancing, and again, I'll talk about this in a while as well, because of social distancing, they can't have as many people in the store. So the stores themselves are not making the money they used to. Whereas, and while online is booming, that's generally not offsetting the total income of the grocer. So we're actually not seeing them, although they've got a huge demand, we're not seeing that demand quite being fulfilled. So they're still not booming entirely.
Okay, let's go back to your stats, if we may, Danny, and we'll just share that again.
Okay. So if you go on to the next slide, I think this one's really interesting because this shows you a chart that's tracked from the start of the year through to lockdown. I talked about the 600 different global retailers and brands for the IMRG track. About 300 of those, because IMRG are a UK-based organization, about 300 of those are in the UK, which skews the data slightly. So you can see when the UK went into lockdown, what happened. If you're a fashion retailer, if you're Victoria Beckham, the floor just fell out. People didn't buy clothing, and I'll drill into that in one slide more. But bits that did boom were electricals, where people were going out and setting up their home office, buying printers and screens, coffee machines, table lamps, those sorts of things, right? So we're setting up at home. We also spent more time at home, so we were buying furniture like desks, chairs, table lamps, and doing things in the garden. And we also wanted to look great on Zoom. So beauty products actually boomed as well. So I think it's really interesting. We all kind of probably got a sense from our own behavior that this was happening, but this is an aggregation of 600 retailers around the world, and it absolutely shows that what our pretty gut feel was true. But I do want to drill into clothing because I've got a bit of a tip for people. If you could just go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So clothing overall has dived, and you can see women's wear, men's wear, and especially footwear has absolutely fallen off a cliff. So my tip for you at the moment is if you maybe you don't need it right now, but almost every footwear company on the planet is offering amazing deals because this has happened to them. They can't really sell in the high street. And this is all online, by the way. All these stats are for online only. And online, then, the axis that you can see here, which has got the percentages, when we normally track these charts, is bumping between, 20% change would be enormous. We're seeing, a 50% decline year on year. So it's an incredible disaster for the Nikes of the world, the Adidas of the world, and the high street shoe companies. I'll let you draw your own conclusions from the lingerie trend, which happened to post lockdown.
I think that the thing with that is all my mates that I'm talking to on Zoom, there they are in their running shorts but with a blouse on if they've got a Zoom call, but none of them are wearing bras. So I dispute that statistic.
Well, so we do actually have subcategory data.
Well, I just wonder whether the 4th week increase in lingerie is because they've all run out of gin and tonic because it's too. There's a very good. I just want to interject with a very good point here from Alan Moffat, who I think is strategy director at River Group, or certainly works in strategy at River Group, who says that profit for retailers is under huge pressure despite the rise in headline sales, with so many staff off sick or self-isolating, plus the extra cost of social distancing controls. Demand doesn't always translate to profit. That's a good point as well.
That's a good point. But to Nikki's point, if we actually have subcategory level data here, so we can go down and look at not just women's wear, but the various elements of women's wear and men's wear and so forth. And the two, it's men's shirts and women's tops that actually are trending above normal. But not enough to offset the fall in all the other categories.
Okay, so there's some really good trends in there. When we think about the next phase, rebound, what are we going to expect?
If you want to jump to my next slide. So I think this is what I think yesterday, was it? In the UK here, we were told to expect social distancing to last at least until the end of this calendar year. Yeah. But the lockdown situation we find ourselves in globally is not going to be like a light switch. It's not we're in lockdown and we're out of lockdown. There's going to be a slow release, and we're seeing that around the world. In China, Germany, I think this week came to the kind of next phase out. Italy, the same. And while some things are opening up, social distancing is having a big impact. So the social distancing will stay here for a while. So as we rebound out, the impact on social distancing in shops, museums, libraries, everywhere that we go in a physical building as consumers is going to remain. What that means is that we're going to see lines like we do it today outside of our grocers. We're going to see lines outside of lots of different shops. From a online or supply chain perspective, in our warehouses, fewer people are in the warehouse of all of these companies today. So with fewer people in the warehouse, there's fewer products being shipped, because the manual process of taking something off a shelf and putting it in a box, they're not allowed so many people in the warehouse. Same with social care. In manufacturing, a great friend of mine is the head of Volvo, and he tells me they've literally stopped manufacturing cars at the moment because their production lines don't have, they're built in a way that you wouldn't be able to social distance. So they have literally had to stop manufacturing. So I guess my question is, around brands and marketing. If we know this is going to happen, what is it that we want to do? And if you just do a build, I want you all to
next slide.
Yeah, just do a click. You should see this Disneyland thing coming in. So I'm going to try and coin a phrase today, the Disneyland effect. So we all have either been or we've seen what goes on at Disneyland. So you've got these wonderful things that we want to go to, these rides, excuse me. And
Have you got it?
I haven't got it, no.
You've got it as well now, Nikki.
I know.
But there's always long lines everywhere. This is what our world will absolutely be like for at least the next 9 months. And so if we know there's going to be lines outside of the shops, what's that going to mean for interacting with people? Are we going to be, are they just going to be playing Candy Crush? Or is that a purpose? Is there now a thing we can do? And I'm not talking about dressing someone up as Cinderella to entertain them in the line. But what is it that we can do in terms of content and engagement that's going to change that line experience? I think one thing that will come out, in fact, I know it will come out because I've been in many conversations with companies that are trying to do it, is that this sort of VIP, I'm going to call it the fast pass, as Disneyland call it, right? The fast pass. So I will be able to book a slot, a bit like being in a restaurant. I will be able to book a slot to go to my local store, be that a bookshop or I don't know, a chemist or whatever, right? So I will be able to book a place to go and have this slot, just like we do with a restaurant today. None of those companies are able to offer that service today. They don't have those capabilities. So they're all very quickly trying to jump to a place where they're offering the ability for customers to book some time in their Louis Vuitton store or bookshop. So I think go on.
Sorry, I was going to say that's interesting from a content point of view too, because to Danny's point, whether you're in a digital queue or more likely going forward, a physical queue, are you going to be on your mobile? Yes, probably, because unless the person in front of you or behind you is known to you, it's unlikely with our great British Reserve that we're going to be socially chatting. And therefore, what content messages and what use of pinging you offers if you're sat outside Superdrug can brands make in the future? Kind of interesting how marketing and commerce are to be so closely aligned in that future.
We're going to come on to just talk about that new normal and things that we can do in a minute, but I know we've got a very specific example, Danny, from the first market that's emerged from lockdown, which is China. Should we just share that? Because I think that's quite interesting, the Hermes example. I'll put that on screen.
Yeah. So what is it that's going to happen? So I think we certainly feel like we're paying some sort of personal emotional sacrifice at the moment, and as we do that in any kind of thing where you're locked down, you generally find that you can see the headlines here: revenge spending in China, and there's and this is happening now today. And so as they're coming out of lockdown, people feel like they've earned something, they deserve something, and they haven't been spending their money in restaurants and commute fees and all those other things that we generally spend their money on. So they've got a little bit of cash and they're bouncing back and spending big on items. So what's going to happen? We'll come out of lockdown, and as each category kind of comes out of lockdown, whether it's high street stores, whether it's travel, things that we've not been able to do for a while, I think we're going to see a huge spike in activity as we all give ourselves that pat on the back, that reward that we feel like we've earned. And those categories and so forth will really explode out the back of this.
Shopping hysteria.
Shopping hysteria, another phrase coined.
You can have those, Joe.
Before we go on to the talk about the new normal, we've got a question here that's quite a good one, which probably both of you can answer, from Tim Rosenberg. Nikki mentioned Weight Watchers ramping up their digital capabilities massively. Danny, what are your thoughts as to how the behemoth Primark, who do not offer direct to consumer, will be able to survive lockdown and subsequent longer term high street impact? And Nikki, I'll add to that a kind of qualifying second element, which is, if you were advising them, how would you advise them to market their brand during this crisis?
So the interesting thing about Primark is that they are probably the largest high street retailer that doesn't sell online, and that had no ambition to. And when you have no ambition to, the challenge that you have is that you have to take products that are normally, if you imagine just very quickly the value chain, they have people manufacturing these products for Primark. Those manufacturers ship into huge warehouses, into big crates, and those crates get shipped into a store where they're broken up and put onto shelves. To sell online, direct to consumer, you typically pick the consumer order in your warehouse. So their warehouses in Primark are full of these big crates. They have no capacity to break a crate up in a warehouse and put it into individual packets that they send to consumers. The only way they could do it would be to open their stores to allow their in-store pick, if you like, so that they would be able to send a customer order. So while I think they are very keen to try and go online, they've got some strategic things they need to fix, like changing the entire configuration of their warehouse or putting staff into a store to be able to then set up distribution centers within their own stores in order to achieve that. So it's a great question. I think they're trying to do it, but they have a lot of other stuff to fix first.
I've got something to add to that bit, actually, before I answer the question to me, which is that Holland & Barrett, which is one of River's oldest clients, we've actually worked with them for 25 years, lots of different people in that time. They are one of the essential retailers who are allowed to stay open, because 90% of what they produce is vitamins and supplements and food products to help you with health and nutrition, and also if you've got any conditions. And they have put a proportion of their store estate aside to fulfill the massive amount of digital orders that they're getting. So they've done exactly what Primark want to do but haven't yet been able to do.
Yeah. Just as an aside, another thing that we're seeing because of social distancing is this concept of bundles. So you may have seen Aldi, I think last week, released for the first time in the UK. I was quite shocked. Aldi, you can't buy online at the moment as a big UK grocer. That was a bizarre concept. But anyway, they launched an initial site last week and allows you to buy bundles. And we're seeing that across many categories. And the reason for these bundles is because when people are picking items, that person that has to be 2 meters away from somebody else, as they pick those items, the bundles mean that you can create a kind of pre-packed set of products that you'll put into the same box. Be that in a grocer's example, that might be some meats and vegetables, some fruit and some hand sanitizer, and you put that all into a box and you sell the box. And the purpose of that bundle is so that the grocer or whoever else can get as many products out the door as possible, without having to have somebody walking around cautiously in the store trying to be social distancing. They can pre-pack them out the back and then sell them as a bundle.
Hotel Chocolat are actually a mutual client of River and Capgemini. Lisa Hardy, the CMO, that's exactly what she and Angus Thirlwell, who owns the business, decided to do over Easter to get the eggs out, those that they didn't give to the NHS, which was quite a large proportion of them because of the social distancing in the DC and not being able to get them out, they bundled them also. Coming back to your Primark question, reputationally, I think Primark are probably sticking to their knitting and trying to flog their product, because not only can they not get it out to people at the moment because they're not online, because they are the kind of retailer that they are, anything that they've got that's available for sale won't be fashionable now anyway, because they've got a 6 to 12 week turnaround. And reputationally, if I was Primark, I wouldn't be worried about what people thought of me in COVID-19. I'd be worried about what they already think of me in terms of child labour in their factories and how cheap everything is. So if they're one of the ones that go down, then who's going to be sorry? Certainly not me.
We've got 2 or 3 open questions, including from John Wilpers and a couple of others, which we'll come to in a minute. But we've got one here from Lucy Kung, regular FIP contributor. Thank you very much, Lucy, for joining us, who's asking, just relating to what you were talking about earlier with the fast pass thing, won't fast tracking favoured customers cause resentment and potentially damage brand perception? Damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do we think that reserving a space in a restaurant favours people that reserve a space in a restaurant? You can still turn up to a restaurant and try and get in. I think it's one of these things that could potentially just become normal. That we all know that we can either go there and queue, or and hope that there isn't a queue, I should say, or we can just go onto that company site and make a reservation. I just think it will become the thing we do, rather than trying to alienate us in some way.
I think another way of spinning that one on its head is to look at the fact that, I know when we went into lockdown, we've got 4 adult children at home between 20 and 23, and they eat a lot. Trying to get a slot with any of the big food retailers, Waitrose, Tesco's, etc., was impossible for at least 3.5 weeks. And while it really pissed us off right at the beginning, now now we know that we've got to book that in advance, put a couple of things in the basket so that we can get a delivery at a later date. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And I think, to Lucy's question, that will become the new normal in the queuing situation. People will accept it, even if it upsets them at the beginning.
Okay, before we come on to our questions, and we're running out of time a little bit, but we might run a little bit over, let's just talk about the new normal. What, after the rebound, we reposition ourselves, we come out the other side into something new, something different. We've talked about what that might look like, but we haven't really talked about the opportunities that we see arising. What about those, Danny? What are the opportunities that we see arising for brands there?
So I wish I had a crystal ball and I knew. But I've got some ideas. I think as humans we're going to have an increased sense of value and values. In terms of value, I mean, I know now that I can buy shoes 50% less. So why should I pay more than that? So I think we're all getting a kind of a sense of what something's worth from a physical goods perspective. But also I think we're going to get a different set of values in terms of reputation.
Yeah, definitely.
The other piece that I think will change is these big systems that run the world, grocery being a great example. They broke because of social distancing. They broke because of a human bit. I think we're going to see automation and robotics come in and try and fix the bit that broke. And I think we'll see a very fast uptake of things like automated distribution centers, a bit like Ocado does today. I'm hoping, because I like the fact that I'm coining a phrase called the Disneyland effect, I'm hoping that that's the good parts of that.
You heard it here first, folks.
I'm hoping that kind of thing could potentially remain, and brands could use the fact they now can book slots to have VIP parties, to have loyalty parties, to invite their best clients to certain times of day and so forth, because they don't really have that today, many of the brands. And I think we'll see, we've all missed interacting with other humans that are around us, really, be it family or friends. So perhaps social will become back to its original meaning of social. Who knows?
Oops, sorry. There we go.
That's all right.
Close enough. Thank you very much, guys. Brilliant. We've got a couple of final questions for you, but before we do that, let's just take the questions from the audience. So we've got one from last week's presenter, muscling in on this week's show, which is John Wilpers, who's asking, how do media companies work with their advertiser brands to replace cancelled adverts with what you're saying brands should do now and then over time as we transition to the new normal? So what's the kind of messaging there for the advertising space?
I mean, the advertising, whatever you believe, and I can say this because I own 4 agencies, advertising is going to go into recession if it isn't already in recession. And we are going to go into a global recession bigger than the one in 2009, which is going to affect spending by brands. I think as a content provider across those agencies to the globe and to lots of different suppliers, but funded often offset in magazines and in podcasts and social media by advertising, I think we need to try and pivot digitally, just like Weight Watchers have done with their offer. You know, how can we be community online? I think what we're seeing where print publications have reduced in circulation, or where it's difficult to get to a newsstand in the UK, WH Smith's, for instance, being closed, is trying to get that advertising into digital packages, most particularly around video and social media. We're having quite a lot of success, I'm pleased to say, in that at River, where previously we had struggled sometimes to sell advertising digitally. So I think this will help. This situation, conversely, assuming we all survive it, will help us in the longer term to be able to sell where consumers really are, not just where we'd like people to think they are.
A sort of related question from Ferhal Semkan here, who's also a fairly regular contributor to FIP events and has been to many of our things in the past, who's asking, what are the suggestions for magazine companies who do not have strong digital platforms? How can, if you're a print-based business, how can you continue to make that connection with your audience?
Social media. In several words, most definitely social media. I mean, the wonderful thing about print companies is that they have great journalistic capability, and those journalists do something very clever. Those magazine and newspaper editors, what they do is they set up an empathy. They become the best friend or the friend of a similar interest of the reader, and that is very possible to do 24/7 on social media. And anyone can set up Instagram, Facebook Live, etc., etc. And if you're B2B, LinkedIn, white papers, blogging, etc., etc. And that stuff is monetizable.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing an enormous boost from LinkedIn for all the work that we're doing at the moment. Another related question from Amir Safir from Review of Religions, again, FIP member. Hello, Amir, good to see you. Who's asking about specific thoughts on advice on how magazine brands can innovate in marketing during the crisis. Should they go beyond their target audience, market more to the target audience? Do we offer more freebies, more free content? What's the kind of tips there from a magazine professional point of view?
Ooh, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and give too much away for free, but equally you want to keep people connected so that they see you are just like the brand thing that I talked about before. You're helpful and relevant, and you're providing content in the right tone of voice that is genuinely useful to your audience, your cohort of audiences. Should you go outside of the people that you know, love you already and buy your magazines or newspapers? Yes, absolutely, if you can be relevant and genuinely useful to them. I mean, if you think about health, River has quite a lot of clients in the health and wellness space. There are 8 million people in December who were interested in health. That number has exponentially grown because of this crisis. So I think it's thinking about how what it is that you would generally write about in print can translate to audiences outside of that medium, and also what messages you can give and what content you can sell, because let's face it, that's what we want to do. We don't want to be giving it away for free, that they might be prepared to buy at this right at this moment in time.
At this moment, yeah.
I guess there's a balance between distribution, readership, and making money. So if you can increase the number of readership now and then monetize it later, perhaps that's another option. So looking at new channels to take that print through.
And partnerships too. Something we're doing quite a lot at River is partnership deals, not just on print, but also in digital. And we are managing to monetize those by putting brands and media together, where they have shared common interest and where they have similar cohort audiences. So if you think of it like a Venn diagram, they might not have exactly the same audience, but there'll be a sweet spot in the middle that you can market to and hope to get a halo effect outside.
Fabulous. Okay, good advice. We're nearly out of time, so we're not going to take any more questions from the audience. Thank you to all those who have asked. We will, of course, get our panelists to answer those afterwards if they are able. But I've got a couple of closing questions for you both. So let me start with you, Nikki. What about the kind of summary of this? What are the takeouts for publishers? We have a great many publishers on the call. What can they take from the world of brands as they develop their strategies?
I think it is to the person who spoke earlier, digitization as swiftly as you can, understand what value you give to your audiences currently with your content, and find out where they are in the digital ecosystem, and put some but not all of your content into those ecosystems and get it sponsored by like-minded brands and advertisers, so that you can keep going until the shops where we sell our magazines are open again.
Absolutely. Danny, your advice to media brands engaging existing audiences, new audiences in a world with the kind of new normal that we've spoken about, how far should they take that?
I think back to the sort of the world that I painted with Disneyland in it. You know, there's going to be new where there's opportunity being lost. I think there's going to be new opportunity. So, you know, give some thought to what that new might look like, and try and find opportunity there. So, is it handing out things in a line? Is it changing, you know, the way we engage digitally in some kind of way that new normal will work with?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. We're giving you a big virtual round of applause for that. We really appreciated your time, and thank you for some great insightful answers that I'm sure everybody would have found useful. Let me just wrap up now very quickly to say thank you very much to everybody for attending. We know that it takes time out of your lives to come on these things. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do look on Twitter, and please do sign up to our email newsletter for more information about what FIP does and for forthcoming webinars. On Twitter, we are @FIPWorld, and I am @FIPCEO. Look forward to seeing you on there. We do have some other webinars coming up very soon. On the 28th of April, we'll be with PressReader, looking at content distribution and how that's changing in the new world. We'll be with Tom Triumph, the noted business thinker, on the 30th of April. And then on the 7th of May, we have that digital subscriptions seminar that I mentioned earlier. Recordings for the webinars that have already gone, including this one, are on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. And there will be more details of that in the email newsletter. In the meantime, please do, if you get a moment, contribute to the GoFundMe page. Thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you. Goodbye.